In a back room somewhere, there is a rack of plastic. Hundreds of SIM cards, each one no bigger than a fingernail, slotted into long boards that hum under a single dim light. Tiny status lights blink in and out, green and amber, each one a phone number that exists only to receive a code and pass it on. Nobody owns these numbers the way you own yours. There is no person attached to any of them, no contract that matters, no real life behind the digits. And yet, to the internet, every one of those blinking lights looks exactly like a human being, ready to prove they are real. That quiet contradiction is what this is about, because the humble phone number became the single most important piece of identity online, and almost nobody noticed it happen. The anchor nobody chose. Think about how many times you have typed a phone number into a website that had nothing to do with phones. A social account, a marketplace, a bank, a game. They asked for a number, sent a short code, and waited for you to type it back. It feels like a formality, a box to tick on the way to the thing you actually wanted. It is not a formality. That number is doing something profound and almost invisible. It is acting as your anchor, the one thread that ties a brand new account back to a real person in the real world. The internet never planned for this. Nobody sat down and decided that a piece of telecom plumbing from the 1990s would become the master key to digital identity. It just drifted into the role because it happened to have a property nothing else online had. Why a number is hard to get. Here is the property that changed everything. A phone number is scarce, it costs money, and it ties back to a real-world identity. Those three things sound small. Together they are the whole game. An email address is free and infinite. You can make 1,000 of them before lunch, and the internet knows it, which is why an email alone proves almost nothing. A CAPTCHA is the same story in a different costume. It slows a machine down, but it does not cost the machine anything. That does not get cheaper every year. Anyone trying to be many people at once can solve CAPTCHAs in bulk, and the platforms know that too. A phone number is different. Somewhere behind it there is a carrier, a SIM card, a billing relationship, and usually a real name and address that had to be handed over to get it. The number is not magic. It is just expensive and annoying to obtain at scale. And that friction is exactly what platforms learn to lean on. Of all the things a website can ask you for, it is one of the very few where the cost of faking it does not quietly fall to nothing over time. The cost of proving you are real. So when a site sends a code to your phone, it is not really checking your phone. It is checking that someone somewhere paid the cost of holding a real number. It is a tax on existence. One number, one small fee, one human being who can usually only be in one place at a time. For a normal person, this tax is invisible. You already have a phone. You already have a number. So proving you own it costs you nothing but a few seconds. The friction was never aimed at you. It was aimed at the person who needs not one account but 10,000. Because for them, every account suddenly needs its own scarce, paid identity-bearing number. The thing that is free for you becomes the single most expensive part of their operation. The economics of many accounts, this is where the real bottleneck appears, and it is worth slowing down on, because it explains almost everything that follows. Imagine you wanted to run a great many accounts on a platform. For whatever reason, you can get servers cheaply. You can get internet addresses in bulk. Software to drive it all is basically free. But every account needs to clear that phone check, and the real phone number with a real carrier behind it is the one input that stubbornly refuses to get cheap. It is the choke point. You can automate almost the entire stack of running many accounts, but you cannot automate a scarce paid number into existence for free. So the number quietly becomes the thing the whole economy is priced around. It is the part that costs real money every single time. And notice what that does to the maths. Servers, addresses, software, all of those drop towards zero the more of them you use. The number does the opposite. Each new account drags along another number that has to be sourced, held, and burned, and that single line item refuses to scale down. So the whole operation ends up shaped by its most stubborn cost, the way a convoy moves at the speed of its slowest truck. The platforms did not have to win every part of the fight. They only had to make sure the one input they could keep scarce stayed scarce. And so an entire shadow industry grew up around supplying those numbers, and it looks exactly like that back room from the start. People in this world talk about SIM farms and SIM banks, which are, at the most basic level, large collections of physical SIM cards held in racks, wired into hardware that can receive a message on any one of them on demand. Picture a board with dozens of slots, and many such boards stacked together, each slot holding a real card from a real carrier. The whole point is to turn the scarce thing, a working phone number, into something you can call up from a pool when an account needs to pass a check. It is industrialized scarcity. Plastic by the hundred. Each card a tiny claim to be a separate person. Understanding that these are real physical cards, racked and powered, is the key to understanding why the rest of the system is built the way it is. Why platforms can fight back. Now, the reason this matters is that physical cards have physical limits, and those limits are what give the defending platforms something to grab onto. A rack of cards sits in one building, on one set of connections, behaving in ways that real scattered humans simply do not. Real people are spread across a whole country, on different carriers, using their numbers slowly and unpredictably over years. A farm is concentrated, fast, and repetitive. Hundreds of numbers from the same carrier blocks, all suddenly receiving codes for the same platform in the same few minutes. The defenders cannot see the room, but they can see the shadow it casts in the data, and that shadow is what they learn to recognize. A single real person picks up a number, keeps it for a decade, calls their family, drifts between apps, lets it go quiet for weeks. That texture is almost impossible to manufacture for hundreds of cards at once. So the platform stopped asking only whether a number is valid and started asking whether it behaves like a life. A number that exists purely to catch codes for new signups and does nothing else a human would do. Starts to look like exactly what it is. The plastic cannot easily fake a history it never had. The war on virtual numbers, which brings us to the numbers that are not plastic at all. You can get a phone number over the internet, a voice over IP number, or a virtual number with no SIM card anywhere. They are cheap, instant, and you can get them by the thousand. And platforms have spent years learning to refuse exactly this perceive. The reason is simple once you see it. The entire value of the phone check came from scarcity and cost. A virtual number throws both of those away. It is free or nearly free, infinite and tied to no carrier SIM and no single human. So a number you can generate endlessly proves nothing. And platforms treat whole ranges of these virtual numbers as ineligible, refusing to send the code to them at all. They are not blocking them to be difficult. They are protecting the one thing that made the check worth doing, the cost. The swap. Explained from the outside. There is one more piece, and it is the dark mirror of all this, so it is worth describing carefully and from a safe distance. If a phone number is the anchor for your whole digital identity, then the most valuable attack is not to steal your password. It is to steal the anchor itself. This is what people mean by a SIM swap. Conceptually, it works like this. Your number does not live in the SIM card. It lives in the carrier's records, pointing at whichever card the carrier says is yours. An attacker who can convince that carrier to move your number onto a card they hold, by impersonating you to support staff or worse, suddenly receives every code meant for you. They have not broken any website. They have moved the anchor, and every account that trusted that anchor now trusts them. That is the whole shape of it, and it is enough to understand the danger without it being any kind of instructions. How the anchor is defended. So how do carriers and platforms defend the very thing they made so important? The answer is layers, because no single check is enough once the anchor itself is a target. Carriers added friction to moving a number at all. A port or a swap can now require a separate code, a pin set on the account, an in-person step, or a cooling off delay, all designed to make moving the anchor slower and louder than it used to be. Platforms, for their part, stop trusting the phone number alone. They watch for a number that suddenly changes hands, and they often pause the highest risk actions, a password reset, a large transfer, for a period after a number moves. The lesson the whole system learned the hard way is that a single anchor is a single point of failure, and the defense is to never let one signal stand by itself. Why the system holds anyway? Step back and you might expect all this to be hopelessly broken. It is not, and the reason is the same economics from the start. Every defensive layer raises the cost of faking the anchor, and the entire attack only made sense because the anchor was cheap to abuse. Make swapping a number slow and noisy. Make virtual numbers worthless. Make a rack of cards easy to spot in the data, and you have not made fraud impossible. You have made it expensive, and expensive is usually enough. The goal was never a perfect wall. It was to push the cost of faking a real human just high enough that, for most people trying it at scale, earning real legitimacy quietly becomes cheaper than counterfeiting it. The humble number wins not by being unbreakable, but by being annoying to break at scale. And here is the part that is easy to miss when you are squinting at a verification screen. Mildly annoyed. The same plastic anchor that locks people out is the thing protecting you. When your bank refuses to do anything important until a code reaches your actual phone, that friction is not the enemy. It is a wall standing between a stranger and your money. That is the double edge of the whole arrangement. The number that gatekeeps the internet, that taxes every new account and frustrates anyone trying to be 1,000 people at once, is the same number that means a stolen password alone usually is not enough to ruin your week. The gate that keeps the crowd out is the gate that keeps you safe inside. An accidental gatekeeper. So that is how a forgotten piece of telecom plumbing became the real gatekeeper of the internet. Not by design, not by anyone's grand plan, but because it happened to be scarce and paid for and tied to a real person at the exact moment the internet desperately needed something that was. A fingernail of plastic ended up holding the line that passwords could not. It is unglamorous and a little absurd. The most important credential you have is not your cleverest password or your most private fact. It is a number you give out without thinking, anchored to a card in a slot somewhere, blinking quietly in a rack. Understand that. And the next time a site asks you to prove you are real with a code, you will know exactly what it is really asking, and why that humble number is so much harder to fake than it looks. If this is the kind of thing you like turning over, the quiet machinery under the everyday parts of the internet, then this channel is your sort of place. There is no product here, nothing to sell you, just the systems taken apart and explained by someone who has spent a long time on the inside of them. Subscribe and follow the rabbit hole. Next time we pull on a different thread, the endless fight between the programs that copy the entire web and the systems built to stop them. Scrapers versus anti-scraping, the war you never see, happening on every page you load. Once you know it is there, you will start noticing the traps everywhere.